mean, the event has changed a ton. It's gone from an event that's only focused on music to an event that's focused on music and technology and film and transportation and food and style and fashion and sports. And if we hadn't evolved, I don't know that we would have survived for so long.
All right. Thanks so much. We're back for another episode of the Greater Texas Podcast. My guest this week is the great Hugh Forrest, the Chief Programming Officer of South by Southwest. Hugh, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Sean. I'm excited to talk to you for a few minutes this afternoon.
And giant Austin FC fan, Hugh Forrest, right?
Much of that has been contributed by the games I've gone to with you, or the game I've gone to with you. Yes, I am. My affection for Austin FC is growing, but
it's fun.
I'm somewhat casual, so I'm not as emotionally invested in it as I am with other teams.
Gotcha. All right, well, let's start a little bit about your background. You're from Austin, right? Or one of the rare Austinite.
I am a townie. I was born here, grew up here, did the Cassis O. Henry Austin High trifecta, and then I went away for college and came back and left several other times, but always came back. So, yeah.
College at Kenyon.
Kenyon College in Ohio, small liberal arts college in the middle of nowhere in Ohio. Has a few Austin ties, which is kind of neat.
Shaka?
Shaka Smart, yeah, the former UT basketball coach. There you go. More to the point, I think that going to a liberal arts college, having that kind of approach to education very much has influenced a lot of the stuff we do at South by Southwest.
Gotcha. Well, let's talk about that. So when you came, did you come back to Austin right after Kenyon? Or?
I did.
And did you start right away with South by Southwest?
When I came back in the ominously named 1984, my goal then was to start a newspaper because newspapers were still in vogue there. And
right.
A buddy of mine I'd worked with a buddy of mine at Kenyon to start a newspaper, and it worked okay. And I thought we could do it here. And certainly there was a lot of competition at that point. There was the Austin Chronicle, which is still very strong. There was a thing called Third Coast, which was this very cool publication. But I thought we could kind of create this niche. So
the niche being
the niche that covers slightly more politics than either we're doing, and have a different kind of perspective. So I spent kind of a year thinking about how to do this, and I launched the first issue of the Austin Challenger in May 1985. In retrospect, I should have probably spent a lot more time researching the whole thing and researching why I shouldn't do it, but there it was. I often joke it was an alternative publication, not because of its politics, but because of its publishing schedule. It was supposed to be monthly, and it was never quite monthly. We came out about every 6 weeks, and it was something you do right out of school when you don't need to eat as often as you might if you had a better paying job. But that survived for, 2-3 years. And I, through the Challenger, I became kind of friendly rivals, whatnot, with the folks at the Austin Chronicle. And the folks at the Austin Chronicle were the ones who started South by Southwest. And so that was how I got pulled in, more particularly or more specifically, and it's always a funny story. I got hired at South by Southwest because I had a computer. It was the computer that I was doing the Austin Challenger on, and they didn't. So always the importance of having the right software and hardware at the right time.
So what year was that then?
That was 87? South by Southwest started in 1987. I came on board in 1989. So it was fully working on the third one.
But you were doing the Challenger from 84 to 89, basically?
85 to 88, 89, yeah.
And then when you went to South by Southwest, did you shut it down? Or did
it it rode off into the sunset, Sean.
Gotcha. Okay, and so tell me, what was South by Southwest like? I wasn't here in Austin then, so what was it like back then?
When South by Southwest, the early days were entirely focused on music. Although it was, let me backtrack there. It was mainly focused on music. It was called South by Southwest Music and Media Conference, and the media portion was because the Austin Chronicle was behind it, and it lined up this network of alternative publications. So there was this kind of media aspect, but again, much smaller. We started off the event started off as 3 days, as opposed to where it is now of 9 days. It was, 200 bands, which seemed like a ton, and is a ton, but nothing like what we do now, where it's 1,500 bands. It was, we had a one-room office at that point, and beyond the Mac Plus that I brought to the equation, the most important piece of office equipment we had was a fax machine, because fax machines were still a thing. But I often say, and I think it's very true, is that South by Southwest is very much a reflection of Austin. And when the event started in 1987, there was an incredibly strong music scene here in Austin, as there is now. And so it made sense that it was entirely or almost entirely focused on music. Right. And I will also say that, despite no one who was working on this thing really having any experience in the event business or the festival business, it kind of immediately resonated with a community, people who were fans of Austin music, who were working with Austin bands, who wanted to learn more about Austin bands. So it's cool when you have an idea that, immediately finds a community, and that's what happened with South by Southwest.
And so then, has it been sort of steady growth to where it is now, or was there a big jump at some point? Or
I think it was pretty steady in the early years. 1994, we added what was then called film and multimedia, funny because multimedia was the term that kind of was the in vogue term for technology, and it was the cutting edge of multimedia at that point was very much like CD-ROMs, which seem thousands of years ago at this point, but that was it. The other thing to know or remember there is that Nick and Lewis and others who started the Austin Chronicle, they all came out of RTF, the radio, television, film program at UT. They always wanted, their big thing was always film.
Gotcha.
And they had always wanted to do a film festival. And so adding this film component to the event was very much, one of their dreams. And it made sense, again, because you had this burgeoning, this emerging film scene in Austin with Linkletter and Rodriguez and various other folks. And the first year we added the film and multimedia component. Oh, that's pretty interesting. It worked pretty well. We then, in 1995, split film and multimedia into two different things. And because I had this computer way back 5 years ago, my boss, Roland, said, you should manage this multimedia thing. I was like, I have no idea what multimedia is, but I can read and whatnot. And, what's interesting about that story, ultimately most interesting, is that multimedia, we really struggled to find our voice there for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. And would not have survived if the music event was not kind of, paying the bills and pulling us along. And, certainly 25 years later, it's a little more roles reversed there, where the multimedia, what's become interactive. The tech stuff is just because tech is so much of a part of our lives at this point. Is a little more the breadwinner and pulls along more of music, although music is still a huge part of what we do. But point there, again, being that it took a long while for us to figure out what we're doing on the tech side of things.
Gotcha. All right, well, let's talk about what's going on now. Obviously, it's hard to talk about anything without talking about COVID, right? And how that affected South by Southwest. What was that like those couple of years? And still, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it was COVID. We were one of the first big things in the U.S. to be canceled because of COVID. There's, so many people who say, when I heard that South by Southwest was canceled, that's when I knew it was real.
Right.
We like to say that we're in our best days at South by Southwest. We are a, predictor of the future, or we're 2 years ahead of things. And unfortunately, we were a little bit so on that.
I think it was NBA and South by Southwest, those two things.
And it was within about a 48-hour period.
Exactly.
There. I remember watching the NBA games when the Dallas game where they didn't come out at halftime, right, or something like that. The 2020 event was completely canceled as an in-person event. We ended up doing some content online for free, recordings of people who were supposed to play here. There really wasn't any film content, nor on the music side. We shortly after the event was canceled, we had to lay off a third of our staff because so much of our revenue comes during the event. So there was no event. That was incredibly tough, painful. Certainly for the people who got laid off, but for staff as well, for people you'd worked with. And the dynamic of the event is that, you work on this event for 8-9 months. It's a long slog, and the payoff is when the event happens and wow, it was worth all the tough stuff. And in 2020, when we didn't have that event, you didn't have that payoff. You actually had this negative payoff of having to lay off your friends. So it was an incredibly tough time.
Yeah.
2021, we did a all virtual event, and that actually worked a lot better, I think, or came out a lot better than what we anticipated. Then this past year, 2022, we were back to an in-person event, and 2022 wasn't as big as 2019, but certainly great to be back to doing what we've done for 30 years and what our bread and butter is, of bringing people together and watching the connections that unfold when you do that.
Yeah.
So we're certainly still recovering from the pandemic in terms of getting back to where we were 2018, 2019. But I think we've got a lot of strong momentum and a lot of good ideas for the future. So it's an exciting time.
Excellent. And so when you have the festival, when do you start planning for the next year then? At what time of the year?
Well, realistically, we, post-event, i.e. end of March and April, you're still kind of licking your wounds a lot and recovering because, it is a long slog to get to the event, and then you don't get a whole lot of sleep on site. That said, we're very, very conscious, very, very diligent about reading feedback from our attendees. We send out a long survey, and for the people who fill that out, we are very conscious about reading that and trying to absorb what they've said, what they liked, what they didn't like, and figuring out or thinking about, well, how can we implement those suggestions or improvements into the following year. So that process is ongoing in the spring. By late May, we're gearing back up again, and then we start accepting speaking proposals in June. We start accepting band applications early July, and at that point, we're
right back in it.
Yeah, pretty much back in it. Part of that process is simply that the longer runway you have for creating an event, the more momentum you can build, the more cool stuff you can bring in.
Right.
And again, we've certainly found success with that. The longer time we have to plan, the better the event comes out.
Gotcha. And I want to make sure I can highlight. Right now, you have an application process open, right, for some awards.
Yeah, we have. We have lots of different ways that our community can participate in South by Southwest. So where we are now in early September, we're still accepting applications for the South by Southwest pitch competition, which is a startup competition. We're still accepting band applications, people who want to showcase their band at South by Southwest 2023, people who want to get their film screened at South by Southwest 2023. And then we also have a thing called the South by Southwest Innovation Award. So still lots of ways for people to participate. And if you're listening and you want to participate,
right.
You can find all that stuff at SXSW.com. But I would say all these...
But those are deadlines, so get them in quick, right?
Absolutely. I will say that, I'm a strong believer in the power of community, and having lots of different ways that the community can engage with us, that we can engage with the community, is one of the things that I think has made the event strong, has made it robust, or has allowed it to continue to grow and evolve. And I think that to your question about where we were, what South by Southwest was like, and when we started in 1987 versus where we are in 2022 and 2023, I mean, the event has changed a ton. It's gone from an event that's only focused on music to an event that's focused on music and technology and film and transportation and food and style and fashion and sports. And if we hadn't evolved, I don't know that we would have survived for so long. I mean, you've got to pivot in whatever things you do. And
right.
Our ability to do that, sometimes because we had a strategic plan to do so, sometimes because it just happened, has again been very much the key to the event surviving and thriving. I think that if we do this interview in another 5 years or another 10 years, who knows what we'll be covering? Who knows what South by Southwest will be like? If it's exactly the same as when we taped this in 2022, we'll probably be in not so great shape. Because again, the key to the event is that it's evolved and changed, and hopefully always a step ahead of the competition or what most people are thinking of.
Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about, Austin certainly and Texas in general are growing very rapidly. That presents a lot of challenges. You mentioned earlier, you mentioned before that the issues facing South by Southwest are the issues facing Austin. And I think you've highlighted 3 specific ones of do you want to talk a little bit about those?
Yeah, for sure. South by Southwest and Austin, very much, tied at the hip. The line between what we do and what Austin does is very porous, very thin.
I feel like South by Southwest could be Austin's PR director, basically.
Maybe, or sometimes. And that's been great in a lot of different ways, because we've helped the city grow. The city has helped us grow. The fact that people love coming to Austin has benefited South by Southwest. The fact that people love coming to South by Southwest has benefited Austin. But the flip side of that is I think we have a lot of the same challenges that the city has. First and foremost there is this ongoing challenge of affordability.
Right.
That Austin is still such a great place, such a fun place, such a robust place, but our longtime the competitive advantage that we had for so long is much less so now than it was, which was that it was so affordable to live. And I think you can argue very strongly that affordability was one of the biggest factors in fostering a culture of creativity, the creative economy, however you want to phrase that. And that's why so much music thrived here, so many different forms of art thrived here, and so much of that creativity that, again, bleeds into South by Southwest.
So if I can ask you a question on that. So I talk about affordability all the time. I think it's a huge issue. How does it affect South by Southwest? Does the fact that I just talked about this recently with John Reedy, but does the fact that it's harder and harder for artists to live here and have studio space and things like that affect you directly, South by Southwest?
I think that is an indirect effect.
Okay.
A little bit of an indirect effect. That it's harder for Austin musicians to live here. Eventually that catches up with the city, where you're going to have, less live music here than somewhere else maybe. And that crown of live music capital of the world is harder to wear. I think that, particularly or specifically to South by Southwest, the affordability is that 10, 15 years ago, South by Southwest was a fairly cheap event to attend.
Okay.
The ticket price was pretty low. You could come here and find lodging at a fairly affordable rate. That is completely flipped on its head in more recent years. We've raised our ticket prices. Harder for people to attend that way. And plus, if you're wanting to get a downtown hotel room, it's fairly pricey at South by Southwest. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't ways for people to find cheap places to stay, to get a badge at a fairly inexpensive rate. But, as South by Southwest the reputation has grown, as the number of people have grown, as more bigger companies have started coming to the event. Again, it's become slightly less welcoming to the up and coming creatives, the young creatives, the independent creatives, the middle-aged creatives who don't have a whole lot of money than it was before.
How do you solve that issue? Can it be solved?
I think that the hardest thing there, I think that there are again ways that people can get lower badge prices. We have group rates that are still very, very competitive. The hardest thing is is finding lodging that's close to the event.
I can help you on that. The city needs to relax the short-term rental rules.
Well, there's that. And then that flows into my second point is that transportation is not great in Austin year-round. It's particularly difficult in South by Southwest. But if you had, better mass transit where more people could stay in, Pflugerville, Georgetown, San Marcos, and get into downtown easily, that would solve a lot of that problem. We don't at this point.
Right.
It's really hard to get around anywhere during South by Southwest. If you're staying out of town, I mean, you're what typically would take 30 minutes to get into town, you're looking at an hour to get into town. It's just makes that harder. So again, if you had better transportation, that would help with some of that affordability thing. I also, one of my dreams or pipe dreams or whatnot is if you had a better network of transportation in Austin, could we do more content at UT? It's not that far away from downtown,
right?
But it's South by South. It's 10 blocks, but in South by Southwest, it might as well be 10 miles because it's just harder to get to. If you could solve the UT problem, could we do more content at the Domain? Look at all that cool stuff that's happening in the Domain.
Yeah.
But people at South by Southwest, the bulk of our attendees are, there's 20 things they can do in a two block radius downtown, and compare that to, well, it's going to take me an hour to get to the Domain, and there's only 2 things to do there. I don't think that's the right use of my time.
So is this just? I mean, obviously the Project Connect is on the horizon, but is there anything that can happen quicker than that?
I don't think so. I mean, and Sean, I would take it even a step farther. Is like, if our friend who's got that big plant by the airport, if we could ever build the Hyperloop between Austin and San Antonio, look, you could have a whole nother,
Right.
South by Southwest happening in San Antonio at the same time. If you could get from Austin to San Antonio in 20 minutes as opposed to 2 hours, right? And again, these are kind of pie in the sky thoughts, but all fits into this idea of transportation is one of our big challenges in Austin, 365 days a year. It's certainly one of our big challenges in Austin in March for South by Southwest. And then the third big challenge we have is safety. We know that as Austin has become bigger and all the cool things that happen when you become a bigger city, more pro soccer games to be able to attend, more great restaurants to be able to attend, more road shows, all these things. But the city's also become a little more dangerous in so many ways. And we've seen that at South by Southwest where each of the last few years, there's been gunshots on 6th Street during South by Southwest, and that's a danger to what we do, to drawing people in Austin for March or year round when they think, "Gosh, is that safe?" So another challenge, not insurmountable challenges, any of these, but again, certainly challenges that we are very mindful of. As we plan South by Southwest, and I think our city leadership is also mindful of as they plan the future of the city.
So I think it's interesting that you talk about how the issues are basically intertwined. These are the same issues we talk about in every aspect of Austin, right? How is your relationship with the city and the city government? Is it a good working relationship, or is it contentious? Or
No, it is a great working relationship, and I will give you, or let me phrase that answer, Sean, in that I think one of the reasons that South by Southwest evolved the way it did, succeeded, is when South by Southwest started back in 1987. The city didn't want anything to do with us, and we didn't want anything to do with the city, and so it kind of evolved in its own interesting, creative way. But certainly that has changed a lot in the last 2 decades or more, where all parties involved realize they need to work with each other because of the size, scale, significance of this event. So we work with the city 12 months a year in terms of planning. Most of that planning is, again, focused on safety. How can we make the event as safe as possible? How can we mitigate any kinds of things that would potentially put any of our attendees at risk? And the city is great to work with. They're a great partner on this. They, again, realize the importance of South by Southwest in terms of marketing the city, in terms of putting the city on the map internationally. So again, they're a great partner to work with. That doesn't mean that we don't have occasional disagreements, right? but again, we are communicating with them constantly, and that's been a great thing.
On the safety issue, is it an issue of just more police presence on the street? Is that the biggest resolution to that, or
certainly? We have a very strong police presence during the event, and that helps the event, mitigate whatever safety problems you have. That said, we had the drunken driving incident 5 or 6 years ago. We had the bombing that went on during South by Southwest 2 years after that. Our challenges here aren't any different than other large events at this point in our society, in our culture. We think about the shooting in Las Vegas during the show. In relation to when we're taping this, 10 days ago, Salman Rushdie got attacked on stage. And so how does that impact and affect our, what kind of security measures we have to put in place for controversial speakers or even speakers who aren't that controversial? So, again, as our society has become a little more violent,
yes.
or as these lines between performer and artist have blurred a little, it makes things more difficult. And again, we work very closely with the city on this. We work with the Department of Homeland Security on this. It's just a fact of life of if you're doing a large event in 2021, 2022, 2023, so much of your planning has to be focused on safety, on security, on thinking about what the worst case things that can happen, and planning for when those things do happen. Hopefully that planning is all for naught, but it's good to have that muscle memory if God forbid it is needed.
I was a little surprised I still had the capability to be shocked when the Rushdie stabbing happened, because like you said, that was in the middle of a speech in the middle of New York. And they stabbed him, I think it's 10 times or something like that. It's just horrific, and that can happen. And I'm sure for you, that's just got to send up huge red flags.
Yeah, it's sad, and I've got a good friend who's very involved with Chautauqua, and so I've talked to him a lot about that. But we plan. Anytime we have a high-profile speaker, we've got lots of security measures in place. But Rush Day is the third of three: the Chris Rock thing, as well as the Dave Chappelle thing, right?
Yeah.
And I think that this is certainly on the minds of most performers. Is that there used to be an understated boundary or understood boundary between myself and the audience now feels, because of whatever, that if I don't like what's going on, I can walk on stage and punch you or stab you or yell at you or something. And that's
insane.
Challenging place to be, right?
Well, let's talk about something a little happier. Tell me about the future of South by Southwest. Stay in the U.S., expand internationally. What do you think?
Well, we're
to San Antonio?
Extremely excited. Yeah, San Antonio. I hope so soon, someday. About a month ago, 6 weeks ago, we announced that we are doing an event in Sydney, Australia in October 2023. This is called South by Sydney. This is the first time we've ever licensed our name to another event. We've done events elsewhere, but they haven't been called South by, so this is a big deal. It's also the first time we've done anything in that region of the world. And while I've never been to Australia, but I will be soon, the idea is that Australia is a lot like Texas, and it's independent thinking, and that it fosters a lot of creativity and artistry, and so it seems like a good match. I think that we will also, beyond this event in Australia in October.
The event, by the way, is it a music event or what? Or
it is very much parallel what we do in Austin. So there'll be a strong music component. There will be a strong component on movies and television. There will also be a very strong tech component.
Gotcha.
So those three pillars of what we do in Austin will occur in Sydney as well. I think that as we move forward over the next few years, we will begin to make more progress in extending South by Southwest from a 9-day event that occurs in Austin every March to a 52 weeks a year, 365 days a year content machine, something we've wanted to do for a long while, but just haven't had the skill to do. One of the things that we that we did as a result of the pandemic is we took an investment from Penske Media, PMC Media. PMC Media owns Rolling Stone, owns Variety, owns Billboard, owns Hollywood Reporter, and as their name says, they're a media company, and they should be able to help us achieve this goal of becoming more of a media content an organization that puts that out year round. Something along the lines or somewhat on the model of TED, but probably in a slightly different way. We've already seen a little bit of that. We maybe 6 weeks ago we launched this thing called South by Southwest Iconic Moments, which is like 100 of the neatest clips from the 30-year history of South by Southwest. It tends to be a little more conference oriented, but you can go to this site, which you can also find off the South by Southwest website, and you can see 6 minutes of Bruce Springsteen talking, or Dave Grohl, or Barack Obama, or Lady Gaga. Some of the most neat content we've had over the last 30 years. So that's a cool thing to push out there, and I think there'll be more of that in the years to come.
That's great. Well, Hugh, South by Southwest, I mean, can't tell you anything you don't already know. It's so intertwined with Austin, and it's been such a boon for the city. And so thank you for putting this thing together. I mean, I've only been here 12 years, but I certainly recognize how fantastic it is.
Well, thank you for the nice words there. But again, I'll say what I said before, and in all completely sincere and truthful when I say this, is South by Southwest is a community event. It's not me who puts it on. It's not our staff who puts it on. It's this whole city that puts it on. It's this virtual community also. I mean, that's another reason why we have been successful, is we rely on the expertise, the energy, the enthusiasm of a lot of different people. I'm a strong believer, even more so in our current challenges, of the power of community to overcome challenges big and small.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for being here. When do tickets go on sale for 2023?
Tickets are on sale now. You can buy if you want to buy a badge, you can buy your badge now at SXSW.com. If you want to buy a wristband, or a music wristband, or a film wristband, which gets you into the bands or the films, those will go on sale early to mid-January. So you got a little time there, and there'll always be lots of shows that you can go to with a single ticket admission, or free things in Austin. Why I love working for South by Southwest even after 3 decades, and amongst all the challenges that we have, is South by Southwest shows off this city and it's kind of its best light, and shows all the things we do well, and it's really, really neat to be part of that, and to see what connections arise when we, again, bring together creative people from all different industries in a very creative city in a time of year when it's the weather's usually nice, and sit back and watch what happens.
Still mad I missed the 3 a.m. print show.
Sean, it was the 5 a.m. print show. Get it right.
Exactly.
Yes.
Well, thanks so much for being here, Hugh. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Have a great day. All right.
Great to be here.
Thanks.